I'm going to stay on this topic, inshallah. I know we hear it almost every day, but it's very important. Because as we know, our brother Shaykh Abdul Rahman, who just spoke right now, usually sometimes when he comes up and he gives an announcement to our community, sometimes he tells us of somebody passing, a janazah or something like that. We hear that at least from time to time. And this, subhanAllah, highlights the fact that Ramadan is not guaranteed. Ramadan is not promised. And it is an opportunity that we need to take advantage of. So many times every year we hear the fact that there's brothers that were with us last year during Ramadan that are not going to enjoy Ramadan with us this year. So, la'alla this can be our last Ramadan. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can choose to take us before Ramadan even comes in. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to reach Ramadan.
Amen.
Ramadan is an opportunity to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And this is one of the purposes of fasting. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us one of the most important purposes of fasting. That is to gain at-taqwa. And at-taqwa, in the Arabic language, the linguistic definition of it is al-hifz. It means to, and we know the term hifz, we use it in the meaning of memorizing, but it can also mean to hold something close to you, to safeguard something, to safeguard something close to you. So the purpose of fasting is to safeguard the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have that in your possession, all the time. And this is one of the purposes of fasting, and fasting is one of the easiest a'mal to do this act. Fasting is one of the easiest a'mal to do this fact, to gain a taqwa. One of the fastest ways to gain a taqwa. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, and the hadith by Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ, he gives us a beautiful, beautiful saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Hadith Qudsi. And Hadith Qudsi is the quote of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's not Quran. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about fasting, He says, كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصوم. كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصوم فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself says that every act of the believer is for him. Besides fasting. Fasting is for me, and I reward for it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the number of the reward for anything else, He says, مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْحَسَنَةِ فَلَهُ عَشْرُ أَمْثَالِهَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of gives us a number, or gives us an estimate of how much we can attain for the small things we do, for anything that we do. But fasting, He doesn't give us a number for it, because the reward is so great that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Because Siyam is something that is between the worshipper and his Lord. It is something between the worshipper and his Lord. فَلِذَلِكَ when the Prophet ﷺ says in another hadith, مَنْ صَامَ رَمَضَانَ إِيمَانًا وَاحْتِسَابًا غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. Al-Iman wa ihtisab is doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doing it solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Siyam is the easiest thing to do solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having ikhlas with it. Why? Because Siyam is not something that is wadih to the people. Fasting is not something that is apparent to the people. You see, all of us here today, we're here today. We know we prayed Fajr together. So it's something that I can see. I can see so-and-so pray Fajr. I can see somebody giving sadaqah in the box, in the charity box there, giving money. I can see somebody reading Quran. I can see somebody going to Hajj. But Siyam is something that you can't see unless the fasting person tells you they're fasting themselves. So it's something that is between the Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His worshipper. And the trust is between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. During the days of Ramadan, we can go off in a corner and drink some water. No one will know. No one will know. And we can act as if we're fasting, break fast with our family? No one will know. But this is the reason why Siyam is something solely between the worshipper and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the benefits and one of the uniqueness of fasting. The reward and the fact that it is done between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the worshipper. Last point about Siyam. Siyam can be compared to, or is a form of, or is a type of ihsan. What is ihsan? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam rather, during the famous hadith where Jibreel came and he visited the Sahaba. The Jibreel alayhi salam, he asked the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam 3 questions. He asked him, what is Islam? What is Iman? And what is Ihsan? Al-Ihsan is the highest form of faith. The highest form of faith that we can achieve. What was the Prophet ﷺ answer to Jibreel? He says, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهِ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him, but in fact, you don't see Him and He sees you. This is fasting within itself. You worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, throughout the day you're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command by not drinking and not eating, and knowing that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. And knowing that you can hide anything from the makhluk, from all of us, from the creation. We can again go off in a corner and drink and eat, and we can come back to the public as if we are fasting, as if we are among them. So fasting is something between, this highlights the fact that fasting is between the Creator and His creation. And this is why fasting, one of the beautiful rewards of fasting is at-taqwa. Because the person develops a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is solely between him and Allah. And he starts to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this act of worship. And the only way, the fastest way, we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through acts of worship. Through acts of worship. We have many ayat in the Quran giving us that. One of them is وَإِنْ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. If we just strive in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we just try. All we have to do is try. We try our best to come to the masjid. We try our best to fast. We try our best to give charity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for us. Make coming to Him easy for us. We have another hadith where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he tells us, very famous hadith, if you walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will run towards you. This is an opportunity for us. And it's an opportunity for us, for ourselves, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not something to be taken lightly, and it's something that can change your life. Because the only way to better ourselves and to change our life is to better our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make it personal. And do things only and solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you practice that with fasting, you will practice that with everything else. When you train your mind for 30 days to fast only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one else will see you, then you will do that with all the rest of your a'mal. And this is the beauty of Ramadan. And this is one of the benefits that we have to take advantage of. And bi'idhnillah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to reach Ramadan and to allow us to take advantage of it as if this is our last one.